And anything short of them winning the championship is not significant. What's important is what happens in the month or two after this tournament with respect to Jeff Capel's being able to go out and recruit, go out and get players, go out and do the things that he needs to do to build this program, as well as retaining his own players. That's what it's going to take. That's really what it's going to take. And at the end of the day, if you really think about it, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy for him to do all that because they have struggled so much. The thing he can offer is playing time. The thing he can offer is the idea that, you know what? We are going to do some really good things in the next few years. But at the end of the day, he's got to win this offseason. If he doesn't win this offseason, he has no chance winning the actual season when it comes up. Zero. He's got to win the offseason. He's got to get to a point where, you know what? People are happy. We brought in three transfer players who are all, highly regarded in terms of other, a lot of other teams wanted them. One of them is a point guard. One of them's some size for us. One of them is somebody that can really light it up. We've addressed three of our most pressing needs. We've kept all of our guys in the mix. So we've got a team coming back, and we got Nike Sabonde coming back, and just for the hell of it, we also got a freshman who we think we can, bring along slowly, and he's going to be a good player down the. That's what he needs this offseason. And so, anything short of that, I don't know how he's going to have success next season. People say, well, what is success? I don't think he's got to win 25 games next year. I don't think he can win 11 again next year either. Somewhere in between that. If he gets to like 17, 18 wins, then you start to have a conversation about, okay, now he's on his way. But none of that happens if he doesn't have the offseason, this offseason that he needs to have, which is a big one. So tomorrow, when you watch the game, understand it's irrelevant at this point what happens in that game. Yeah, the players and him, they all want to make sure that they are, able to go out on a high note and win some games and do all the other stuff and everything else that goes on, right? All that's important. I get it. But to me, that's only important to them. What's important really to all of us is very simple. What are you going to do in this offseason to make yourself better? And more importantly, what is better, what is important to your bosses? What are you going to do to make yourself better? See, I don't believe that he, should be fired. I don't believe that they should be talking about him, moving on from him. But I do believe that it has to be, at some point, a little bit of a hot seat for him. I do believe that. I do believe that. There has to be a little bit of a hot seat at some point, and next year is when you have it. So, at the end of the day, it'll be really kind of funny just to see the things that he does to try and get better for this program. Now, the ACC tournament is in Brooklyn. And I remember when Jim Boeheim really got beat up a couple of years ago because he said, this is where, I think it was in D.C. that year, but he said, this is where the tournament should be. Here, Atlanta, a place like Brooklyn, maybe even Boston, Philadelphia. There's no value in us going and playing this tournament in Greensboro. Now, of course, the league offices are down there, right? And the league is based down there. Let's face it, the ACC is run by Duke and North Carolina. Um, Maybe to a little lesser extent now because football's important, but let's face it, Duke still carries a lot of weight. North Carolina still carries a lot of weight. And so the league is down there, and of course they're always probably going to have Greenville in the mix. They're probably always going to have him in the have Greensboro in the mix for the ACC tournament. But if you've ever gone to the tournament, it's so important to understand the atmosphere and everything else will never be what it was at Madison Square Garden for the Big East tournament over the years. I mean, they still have the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden. It's still there. I watch it on TV. It's not the same. No offense. Watching, Creighton play against Butler is not, it's just not the same as watching those old Big East games. And I think the other part of it is the atmosphere there is really, really, really different. It's so much different to be able to watch games there and everything else. There's nothing better. There's no event better in my mind than going to the Big East tournament back in the day. And I don't mean back in the 80s and 90s. I mean even in the 90s and 2000s when the Big East was really at its height, its height. When those games were a war every single night. When you got to watch teams like, Syracuse, battle Georgetown, Villanova against Pitt, those kind of games, Connecticut, those games were unbelievable. And the conference tournaments really, the Big East was probably the most important conference tournament, the biggest conference tournament, the most competitive conference tournament, and everything like that. But, a big part of that was Madison Square Garden. So now they're playing in Brooklyn. I just don't think it's quite the same. I just don't. I think that it's a situation of where it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel the same as having, when you think about it, having the ACC tournament in Brooklyn, I don't know, it just doesn't feel the same and it doesn't feel right. And I know what they're trying to do. I know that Syracuse and company have really done a pretty good job of selling the idea of, hey, you know what, we have a situation here of where, if we could get to New York, it would be incredible and all that other stuff. And I think that the ACC is buying it and bought it. And, they've tried to rotate the situation, rotate the tournament around to different sites and gone to D.C. and places like that. I honestly don't think that it is necessarily a good thing, honestly, in terms of I would love to see it find a place. And I think the ACC tournament should be I think the ACC tournament should be in D.C. or Atlanta, to be honest. Find one place and try and create a new tradition. This thing where you bounce around from place to place to place, I understand what they're trying to do. Like I said, I'm sure the Syracuses and the Pitts and the Notre Dames have sold them all on the idea of the idea of the fact that they are, being in a big city, being in New York City was really something great and all that other stuff. It is just, to me, really difficult to get into it the same way because it's different. Again, I like the fact that there is that the Big East was at Madison Square Garden and made that their home. Now, I went and covered an ACC tournament in Greensboro. I'll be honest with you, it just wasn't the same. You know what it felt like? It felt like the first and second rounds of an NCAA tournament, which you would think, oh, man, that's an unbelievable, that's a great atmosphere. To be honest, the Big East tournament atmosphere was far better than the first or second round atmospheres when you had, you'd go there. And of course, in a couple weeks it'll be here, and you get to see teams that you wouldn't normally see and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, it's important, to remember that part of the experience is the inside the arena, the atmosphere. It's also outside the arena, the atmosphere, and it's also establishing a tradition